important as parents that we do just touch upon Helenor's clinical management during the 8.5 months and then the last fortnight of the closing of her life. It's extremely important that the criteria of a clinical management, but none other, was willful, reckless, criminal neglect. The IVP in itself, the kidney X-ray, showed that Helenor had encephalitis. He lied to us. He told us it was epilepsy. Not having that information ourselves, and still denying, as we've already said, Helenor did not have epilepsy. He still insisted, as we've stated, that epilim was to be introduced into her clinical care for her to control her epilepsy. Well, Helenor never, ever had, and I'm underlining this, as her daddy's already said, that Helenor never, ever had a convulsion in her life, and she never had epilepsy in her life. But under threat, the drug was prescribed, and within 3 weeks, Helenor's medical condition of being on the drug epilim deteriorated rapidly and was totally ignored. Never ever were there any blood tests taken for liver tests to see whether indeed the drug epilim, sodium valproate, or as in America, dipakine or Depakote, was now causing a problem with the liver. The kidney X-rays, which she had at the time of the IVP, had all proven that Helenor's kidneys were normal. And yet, after being on the medication, Helenor's kidneys were failing. Her liver was failing. And this was as a result of the willful, reckless, criminal neglect, not only of her clinical management, but also of the medication she was being given, not being listened to at every monthly clinic, when first of all it was drowsiness, followed by coordination, followed by vomiting, followed by hallucinating and confused state, and also aggression and personality changes, which was totally out of all concept of Helenor as a 12-year-old child. What is even more shocking, that the paediatrician, Dr. Trevor Jones, now wanted Helenor to be seen by a she'd been seen by a psychiatrist. She was now going to be seen by a psychologist, with the understanding that Helenor now was going to be put into a school for disturbed children. We were absolutely horrified. So concerned were we. We went to see a headmaster at the school where she'd been going. We'd never had any school problems with Helenor. And on speaking to him about the decision that the paediatrician was making via the school sociologist, that Helenor was to be transferred to a school for disturbed children, our headmaster was horrified. He said there was never, ever any side effects of Helenor needed any reason for her to be taken or to attend a school for disturbed children. She was a very well balanced, happy child that diligently did her homework, and her schoolwork was a pleasure to teach. And he said he would be looking into it, as he found the whole aspect of this decision made without the school authority to put her in a school for disturbed children, without ever speaking to the education department. So of course that was dismissed.
We have letters from the headmaster and from the church that she attended of praising Helenor for her good character, and written in the medical records there is an entry that Helenor was suffering from school phobia. Now, if you check her school attendance, as the headmaster has reported, Helenor never suffered from any anxieties about going to school. She certainly wasn't top of the class, but she loved her school, and Helenor was used by the teachers and the headmaster that if a new entrant started in the school, and she was given the responsibility of taking these new entrants around the school and showing them the pros and cons of how to sort of settle in the school. And that was Helenor's, she thought...
one of her duties.
She thought more of other people than herself. And going back to 1977, when we first took Helenor into the doctor about this urine infection, and viewers, if I remind viewers, that Helenor only went into hospital with a minor irritation of a little private part, and 9 months afterwards she was coming out of a hospital in a wooden box. Now, only weeks before she was taken into the hospital in 1977, Helenor was chosen for her good character, her good nature, and her support to people in the community, and she was given the responsibility, chosen from the children of Wales, to present her Royal Highness Queen Elizabeth with a bouquet of flowers at the Silver Jubilee.
What was even more disturbing, that written in the medical records, which we received some 24 years later, was written, a child portraying the symptoms from the film Exorcist. And do you know, our daughter at that stage was dying. Also written in the medical records that the mother still insists it's medical. So it was obvious that they'd been treating that child. When we weren't there, in those days, you could only see your child twice a day, in the afternoon and in the evening. So we still lose sleep. What was happening in the hours that we weren't with her, and she was being treated as a psychiatric patient. She was not allowed to go to bed when she was literally, her life was in crisis. And written in the records, mother still believes the child is clinically, is medically in need of medical attention. And the paediatrician Trevor Jones was still insisting it was psychiatric.
One of the important things that must be mentioned here is the time when Helenor was being transferred from Bridgend Hospital to Cardiff. It was on the Friday evening prior to Helenor's death on the 27th that we were told by a sister on the ward, because she was concerned as to the treatment Helenor was receiving under the care of Trevor Jones, and she said that we should contact Professor Peter Gray at the University Hospital Wales. That Friday evening we went on the phone and were able to sort of contact Professor Gray. Now, Professor Gray arranged beds for Helenor and her mother, and Trevor Jones was still refusing right up until the Sunday night to discharge Helenor. Now, during that weekend, Trevor Jones went into the hospital and removed all of Helenor's medical records. You had the registrar, who was now responsible for Helenor over the weekend, without any medical records of Helenor whatsoever. And he was spending, and he admits at the coroner's inquest 2 years afterwards, that he spent hours up in the hospital library checking up on Helenor's condition to be able to check what her condition was. Now that is medical negligence at its at its extreme. Coming up to the coroner's inquest, which was 2 years after Helenor died, we were starting making inquiries as to what caused Helenor's death. in the process of trying to establish Helenor's cause of death, because there was all sorts of excuses coming out from the hospital that Helenor had a very rare medical condition. Now, we didn't believe that Helenor had a very rare medical condition. This is one of the excuses that the medical fraternity use. Not every death certificate is true. Many are false, and entries into Helenor's on her death certificate is natural causes. Now, Helenor, we've established over the years that Helenor died as a result of the drug epilim, sodium valproate,
which was abused.
But on the death certificate, there is an entry there of Helenor has died of a natural occurrence. No mention of the medication, no mention that the doctor abused Helenor, no mention of the abuse that's received by nurses on the children's ward, and there is no mention or recording or data sent to the Committee on Safety of Medicines as to the side effects of this medication, epilim. So you have many deaths, and this is what we established over the years during our campaign, that children's medication given to children in this country is all arrived through guesswork. Children's medication given to children is not licensed in this country. And what is mean by not licensed? It doesn't go through the full medical
procedures
testing procedures that drugs given to adults. In fact, medication given to animals goes through a far more stringent procedure than medication given to children in this country. And what we've advocated over the years, that as a result of medication being given to children on the whim or the guessing of a qualified doctor, that if a child suffers the consequences, either death or severe adverse reactions, that at the time of post-mortem, that the body be examined by a pediatric neuropathologist and a pediatric toxicologist. Now,
scientific.
If you carried out these procedures, you will establish the true cause of how that individual has died. They do it in the event of a child being murdered. You will listen to the news and you will hear that forensic scientists have been brought in to establish how the individual has died. But in the event of a doctor being killing a child, as in the event of Helenor, these procedures were never entered into. Now, Trevor Jones at the time, because we had publicity through the paper, through the media of the television and radio, 2 other families came forward alleging that Trevor Jones had killed their child. And during the time that just 2 days before our inquest, Trevor Jones accused me of a dangerous driving through the town of Porthcawl where we lived. Strangely enough, a couple of months afterwards, one of the other parents who had alleged that Trevor Jones had killed their daughter, Trevor Jones accused him of dangerous driving through the neighbouring town where he lived.
Bridgend.
Now this clown prince of paediatricians, which I've referred to, when the coroner established with the so-called witnesses that he had called forward, established that Helenor never suffered from epilepsy. Now, 4 weeks after the coroner's inquest, this clown prince of paediatricians, Dr. Trevor Jones, wrote an article in the Lancet Journal referring to Helenor, referring to the fact that she'd suffered from epilepsy and it was confirmed by an EEG examination. This was a total fabrication and a total untruth. We wrote to the Lancet, the editor of the time of the Lancet, expressing our concern that this habitual liar was writing articles and having them published in the Lancet journal, and these were not true facts as to what happened in our case. And you had medical students, other physicians following this information in the as printed in the Lancet journal, and we were refused any publicity by the Lancet journal simply because they felt that we weren't qualified to state what we had experienced. If I can take viewers back to a statement regarding the time that we went to the funeral parlour and we noticed Helenor's hairline different than normal, and that drew us to the fact that Helenor's brain had been removed, and that is not a very pleasant experience to go through. As I mentioned, Helenor died in 1978, and to leave the funeral parlour and then to explain this to your family and friends, it's an experience that they don't want to listen to, they don't want to believe it, and they feel, or we felt as though we were not so much telling untruths, but we were exaggerated as to what we'd seen at the funeral parlour. What the general public don't realise, and probably you as viewers watching this documentary don't realise, is the position that we were placed in. I was asked to give authority for biopsies to be taken from Helenor's various organs. And I was happy to give that permission on the understanding that everything was explained to me, and everything was explained that by the removing of this minute tissue would enhance the prognosis of Helenor's condition, and that would enhance the procedures to save her life. Now, when, from our experience, we left the hospital having been told that Helenor was not maintaining her life on a life support machine, and we left the hospital not being allowed to see Helenor, and from our experience, and with the medical notes that were provided to us 24 years afterwards, and from our experience of seeing Helenor in a coffin and establishing at that time that her brain had been removed, it was on reading the medical notes 24 years afterwards that we could see what the profession, the doctors were up to at the University Hospital Wales. And that we have got to live with for the rest of our days. The procedures that they adopted wasn't to remove minute tissue, which we'd given them approval for with the intention of saving Helenor's life, but they were removing organs whole to cover up for the consequences of their colleague. These organs were removed by a neurosurgeon way before a post-mortem was undertaken, and when the brain had been to 2 establishments, this is what the records show, and the person who was asked to carry out the investigation on the brain, his comments were that this brain had been tampered with, and so therefore he was unable to give a true account of how Helenor met her death. This is an evil practice. It goes on under the camouflage of so-called reverence for the dead, Consequently, because there is a shortage of organs, body organs in this country and in other countries for transplant, the government has asked the general public to give approval and sign organ donation cards so that at the time of death or accident, sorry, not at the time of death, but accident, organs are available to save the life of an individual. What people don't realise, and you again as a viewer of this documentary don't realise, if the organs are going to be removed from your relative, they are not removed from a victim who is dead, they are removed from a person who is still alive. These are removed from the body whilst the individual's life is sustained on a life support machine. So your individual, or you giving approval for your organs to be removed, they are removed from your body whilst you are still alive. Dead organs are no good to anyone.
Okay.
As I said earlier on, back in 1978, people didn't believe what we were saying. You have the situation out in Jersey at the moment when children there complained of being abused. People didn't believe them, and they are now finding bodies buried under chunks of concrete. This applies exactly in our experience where people would not believe us that paediatricians kill. And we've had to live with that. And still, in 1978, we took our complaint to South Wales Police. They didn't believe it, or they didn't want to believe it, and they supported the doctor. Over the years that we have tried to establish justice for Helenor, even up until the present police inquiry, the police don't want to believe it. Lots of things that we have pointed out in the medical records, they've found and pointed out that is irrelevant. Irrelevant. And the paediatrician back in 2003 died at the wheel of his car. We were informed virtually hours after his death that he had died. And as a result of that, we wrote to the police immediately to ask the police to set up a search warrant to search his house and remove data off his computer, files from his house, because he certainly wouldn't have had files on Helenor, because he was allowed to keep medical records. South Wales Police never interviewed Dr. Trevor Jones all the years that we had been persisting our complaint against him. He was allowed to keep medical records. The hospital was allowed to keep medical records. They were the safeguard, they were the guard and the safekeeper of Helenor's stolen organs, and we were left to wait 24 years before we were given medical records. The medical records, as I've said, have been fraudulently sculptured, and even those that we've got, we can prove that a lot of wrong went on in Helenor's care. During the times of our campaign to establish justice for Helenor, though South Wales Police didn't believe our story, but were obliged to carry out some sort of investigation just to prove to the public that they were looking into this case. Our MP who, as Joan has mentioned, later became the Attorney General. And the Attorney General is the government's legal advisor, warranted that our case warranted a Section 84 public inquiry. This was supported by our medical expert. Now, our MP, John Morris, as I said, former Attorney General, said throughout his public career, this was one of the worst cases that he had set eyes on. And here you had two people, one a professor of childcare and one an Attorney General, saying that our case warranted a public inquiry. This we have never received, but we are still campaigning on that. Hopefully one day we will achieve that.
After experiencing Helenor being in a coffin and her brain had been removed, the both of us sat together and we were devastated. Truly, we didn't want to proceed with the funeral. But can you imagine family and friends and relatives all thought we were imagining what we were seeing, but they weren't aware what we'd gone through at the University Hospital of Wales. They were trusting the family and trusted in the system, as we had, in believing that they did what they best for Helenor. But we knew so different. The pressures on us at that time to proceed with the funeral. We wanted to keep Helenor, but constantly being told, you've got to proceed with the funeral. And then the final decision came. Was there to be cremation or burial? That decision we could not make. Our minister came along and tried with us, and we just couldn't make a decision, and he just felt that it would be in the best interest to proceed with the cremation. We were not able to argue or anything. We were devastated. And it went through as planned, realising on that day we were getting rid of our evidence. We didn't put Helenor's ashes in a small plot because we knew there was more to come. So we had a proper graveside set aside, that when one day when we'd have the strength, we would be able to go and rest the remains of Helenor's body. This was too hard for any member of our family or friends to accept what we were trying to tell them. So we proceeded on our own, and the final body blow came at the coroner's inquest when the pathologist, Dr. Oppenheimer, said he was somewhat concerned the whole brain had been removed, and when he received it, it had been tampered with. That we began to realise what we knew to be true was now beginning to come to light. We pursued and constantly investigating, asking questions. We went back and forth the University Hospital of Wales, meeting Professor Peter Gray for well over 16 years. And each time he was very compassionate and concerned. On the odd occasion he'd come to our home. And just before his death, he phoned us up and he said he didn't have very good news. He'd like to come and see us. And we knew he was a very caring professor of childcare, but we also knew he was under the regime that allegiance to colleagues are more important than the annihilation of Helenor Joyce By's life, and his allegiance to his colleagues was paramount that he could maintain his career as a caring professor of childcare. He made this visit to our home and he told us, that he didn't have good news. We told him we were used to bad news. And he put his head down and he said, I've been diagnosed with prostate cancer and my life, I haven't long to live, but I've had to come to meet you. And his words were, I will have to meet my Maker for what I've done to you as a family. I said, how sad, Professor Peter Gray, a man of your compassion and concern for children, would rather meet his Maker than fear the wrath of his colleagues. Some weeks later, Professor Gray died. We did attend his funeral. We showed him the respects that unfortunately he was unable to show us the same respect for the death of our child because he was entrapped in a system of total corruption, of the cover-up of the unlawful killing of Helenor Joyce by his colleague, Dr. Trevor Heaven Jones. Some years later, we decided to leave Wales as we really felt we were up against the establishment, not only the health authority, but right through the system after changing the data sheet on the drug on 3 occasions. And then we left Wales and we moved to Poole in Dorset. Well, I must say the respect we've had here has been unbelievable, respectful of our concerns of our beloved daughter's death. Chief Constables have granted us 2 meetings. We've been met by the Crown Prosecutor in Dorset for 3.5 hours. And he just bowed his head when we told him how our daughter had met her death and how the system in Wales had treated us, South Wales Police. They were obvious, were not interested in establishing how Helenor died, but were there more in protecting the establishment. And I'm warning people out there, never ever go to the police if your loved one has died in hospital, because the procedures are evil. Going on, we were not long moved into Poole area, and we got a letter from the University Hospital of Wales informing us that they had all Helenor's body parts. Still, 20 years after her death, they had, in the letter they'd stated, which we've got confirmed in our file, that they had the remains of our daughter's body, which 20 years after her death, they had made blocks and slides and they'd incinerated the remains. What a horrendous letter to read. Realising we had to move on. So some years later, we made a decision on the 3rd of April 2004 to proceed to reclaim the remains of our little girl's body. Radcliffe Hospital, Oxford, who had the brain and all other parts and blocks and slides, and the University Hospital of Wales. We'd been to the funeral parlour, arranged now for it to be collected in reverence from both places. Unfortunately, we had a phone call from the police. Oxford had agreed for that we could reclaim, and so had the University Hospital of Wales, but unfortunately, South Wales Police blocked our ability to reclaim, saying they needed them for criminal exhibits. Bearing in mind, South Wales Police, as was aware of this crime from
1978.
May 1980, on the 21st of May, when they were first informed that we were concerned of the unlawful killing of Helenor. We are now talking 2004. What a load of charlatans. We waited then, and in 2005 we made a decision that we would proceed and attempt to reclaim Helenor's remains from Oxford and Cardiff. When we had all arrangements made, we visited Oxford and we were received with reverence. We'd written a letter and asked if we could be received with reverence and respect on that day. We were granted the respect that we are requested. On the Sunday, prior to going to the University Hospital of Wales, a knock came at our front door, and Daddy went to the front door. I was in the window writing, and this man came along. He pushed a letter in Helenor's Daddy's hand, and he said, "Are you Mr. Bye?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "This is for you." He pushed it in his hand. He ran away, jumped in his car, and her Daddy shouted, "Joan, Joan," he said, "take the number of his car. There's something suspicious going on." On opening the letter, we were devastated. There were more body parts to be picked up in a further 3 hospitals. Can you believe that such evil exists within the medical profession and South Wales Police? Realising we'd made all arrangements that the service would be held in Wales, in the Sunday school where Helenor had gone from the age of 18 months and grown up and had the most happiest time of her life. She loved her Sunday school, she loved her day school, and she was a very happy child, and was even more happy when she had more people and friends around her. We put a little article in the press in Wales saying that if anybody could remember the passing of Helenor Bye on the 24th of April 1978, if they'd like to attend the service, they could come along and have the final closure, as we thought at the time, on Helenor's life. So with everything arranged, the funeral parlour, arrangements at the University Hospital of Wales, we were now proceeding to go to the University Hospital of Wales. On arriving, our undertaker was horrified to find out we were met by 3 security guards, refusing us entry into the University Hospital of Wales. Our comments made by Helenor's Daddy, "Good God, you'd think we were outside a nightclub with the bouncers." Very compassionate undertaker, he said, "You sit in the car with the coffin." And he went with the 3 police officers to where they said we could take Helenor's coffin up into the funeral parlour, up into the chapel of rest, where we had requested a little service, where we had written some weeks before to the chief executive. Our undertaker came back after viewing the entrance, and he said, "I've turned it down. I'm horrified," he said. "It's like a rabbit's burrow, and in no way am I allowing you to enter that corridor. It's my day to show you my respect to you as a family and my compassion." He said, "You sit in the car. Well, the three police officers came on to the undertaker and offered him another entrance. Undertaker went off, and when he got there, he was even more horrified. He said, "In no way." He came back and he told us he had turned that entrance down. At the dignity of our beloved daughter and us as parents was paramount on that day, and if they could not offer us a better entrance into the University Hospital of Wales, we would not be entering the hospital. They came back and they offered him another entrance. Our undertaker came back. He said, "I am not happy to accept, but there is an improvement." But he said, "You'll have to pass all the skips and the rubbish of the hospital before you can regain entrance into the hospital corridors which had been lit up." As you can imagine, we were all emotionally exhausted, bearing in mind we had the remains of Helenor in the coffin that we had collected the day before from Oxford. We made our way the corridor. The three police officers followed us all the way, followed us up into the funeral parlour. And when we got there, we thought we would have been received with reverence as we had requested. Unfortunately, the padre there, or the minister, came on and he said, What is this all about?" Helenor's brother, Lyndon, was holding the coffin, and so was Daddy. I had a cross of flowers, which I called the cross of shame. He said, "I don't know anything about this. What is this all about?" And the Daddy said, he said, "We did inform the authorities 3 weeks ago. Could we be met with compassion? Could we have a little service when the remains of Helenor's body was handing over?" He was totally unaware. We went into the chapel of rest. I cleared all the things off the top of the little organ, and we placed the coffin on top. With that, Mike Spencer of the University Hospital of Wales and the forensic scientist Steve Ledbetter came along with all the boxes in their hands of the remains of Helenor's body. In a way, I felt sorry for them, because I thought they were doing the dirty work, or the chief executives were now totally responsible for the cover-up on the unlawful killing of Helenor Joyce By. But they had a duty to perform, and like I said, if you want to keep your job, you've got to shut up and say nothing. They handed the boxes over, and our undertaker insisted that every box was opened, and he counted every block and slide, every particle of the body, as he reverently, peacefully and patiently placed them in the coffin. Besides where the brain was and the remains of her brain that we collected from Oxford. Can you believe that we are living in a civilized society? Can you believe that these police officers followed us right out of the grounds?
Security guards, John.
Security guards followed us out till we entered our funeral car, and we left then and went to Wales to have a service held there.
You would have sworn on that day that we were the evildoers, not the victims of this crime. And Joan mentioned earlier in her conversation that we'd given notification to South Wales Police about collecting the remains. And the letter I wrote to South Wales Police, which is in the file, states that we don't want to be put in a position when we carry out this funeral to have notice from South Wales Police as we are so-called finalising all the arrangements, there are further body parts scattered throughout the country. And this is exactly what happened. I don't know whether it's incompetence with South Police or it is deliberate just to excite.
I would like to draw your attention to this photograph. This is the coffin that we had at the University Hospital of Wales. This coffin still remains in the funeral parlour, and I can assure you the only reverence we've received from anybody in regarding the unlawful killing and the willful, reckless criminal neglect and the abuse of the drug epilim has been from our poor undertaker. His reverence he has shown us from the first day we met him, and still holds that reverence today. We are now talking is 2008, and we spent Mothering Sunday. We went up to the funeral parlour to place flowers in memory of our daughter, bearing in mind that we have more hospitals to visit before we can bring closure on this crime. But even when we've collected the remains, we are in no position to bring closure on the unlawful killing of Helenor, because this is a crime we have not committed, and if we dispose of the criminal evidence that we've been able to get access to, we are no better than those people who have committed the crime. We are decent, respectable, upstanding, law-abiding citizens and victims of a police state who have chosen the road to vilification, intimidation and a violation of the criminal law. I hold Chief Constable Barbara Wilding, known to be author of Shoot to Kill, have granted an asylum for paediatrician Trevor Heaven Jones, immunity from any criminal investigation. Therefore, she has set a precedent that paediatricians have a license to kill. Also, the Crown Prosecution of South Wales, Hugh Haycock, his responsibility to investigate this crime is bordering on criminal deception, and the CPS in Wales stands for the Criminal Protection of Paediatric Services. I would like to say to all those that have viewed this DVD to bring to some kind of realization. You have children, you have grandchildren, and what the profession has so abused far too often is the instinct of motherhood and parenthood and grandparenthood as well, and even somebody that's very close to the child. The instinct of knowing their child when they are poorly is fundamentally important to a professional paediatrician who, in his role of duty of care, of compassion to the child, he will listen to these parents and grandparents and whoever may be responsible for the child, listen intently to what they feel may be wrong with their child, and through his professionalism within the arena of paediatrics, his expertise and the expertise as parents. Don't forget, we are the experts of our children. It brings a tremendous harmony in understanding what is wrong with the child. And when these two work together in harmony, it brings about a better understanding in diagnosing, in treating what may be wrong with your child. And what is more important than anything, that arrogance within paediatric services is the deprivation of paediatric services, which is what we endured. And I feel if arrogance is responsible for a child's death, they should be made accountable. I also would like to bring to your attention another brave family who were taken on the establishment, the Will Powell and the Diane Powell case regarding their dear son, Robbie Powell. He's been fighting for 18 years. He's gone right through the system, as we have done. He's also gone to the European courts. He's had an inquest on his child. And I can assure you, he's well deserved and is pleading and asking for a public inquiry in Wales regarding what happened to dear Robbie Powell. The other family is David Grothier, who has fought diligently for 6 years, like us, the police involved, right through the system, where they've been exploited as well as the William Powell, like ourselves, in bringing some kind of realism that somebody somewhere is responsible for the unlawful killing of his dear daughter, of criminal neglect while in the clinical management of his child, as in the William Powell, as in the Helenor case. We must bring to the public notice. These are 3 which have been outstanding in Wales. We've been going 30 years. William Powell 18, and the other family is going 6 years. We are not walking away from the scene of the unlawful killing of our children, but unless we have a public inquiry that we can establish where the system is failing our children. Child abuse is very much on the agenda of paediatricians and the police. They hold a very powerful position. But when it is their neglect, the police run the other way, and so does the professor, the paediatricians, and their colleagues run in a different direction. And unfortunately, these tragic cases are endorsed by the coroner's courts, which is an outdated ritual which exploits death and exploits the dignity of death within the coroner's courts. I ask once again, on behalf of humanity and the respect of children, a public inquiry is fundamentally important. We have already stated, 60 years on, we're digging up remains of children in Jersey. And this is as a result that there are people that have worked with these children, like the people that work with our children, that it's more than what their job is worth to speak out of the abuse of our children by professional abuse. And not until we get to grips with these issues that people, like the Professor Greys of this world, can walk tall and say to the establishment, my colleague have failed in his duty of care, which has resulted in the unlawful death of this precious child. Only then will we begin to bring some kind of credibility to paediatric services, which is limited, it's criminally flawed, and it's well overdue for public scrutiny. I urge those a public inquiry, please.
If any of the viewers have experience a similar episode in their lives, we are more than welcome to offer support and advice, and our contact is license to kill at googlemail.com. On the 1st of June 2005, if Helenor had lived, she would have been 40, and it was an appropriate time for us to hold a remembrance service for Helenor in the little chapel in Porthcawl where we used to live. And in preparation for this remembrance service, I composed a short poem which I felt summed up not only our feelings of asking for support in prayer, but many other victims have also probably felt the same, and many people have asked for copies of this poem. And the poem is simply called God Has Gone on Holidays. And it reads, God has gone on holidays, he's walking by the sea. Each time I've tried to speak with him, he never answers me. I've knelt and prayed and read your verse, but what have I got to show? A lock of hair, a picture book, and a broken heart in tow. What sin have I committed? My slate, I trust, is clean. I've practiced what your good book reads, a Christian I have been. I've lived life by your commandments, each one I've tried to obey. But God, when I go down on my knees, you've gone on holidays. But God, you took my treasure, Helenor Joyce, by. And God, I want to ask you the reason why, oh why, oh why. But God, you've gone on holidays. You're walking by the sea. But one day we'll have to meet and you'll have to answer me.